If someone had told me a year ago that I would die and return to life with a revelation that would change everything I thought I knew, I would have laughed. Death had always seemed like the final stop, the point of no return. But now, as I sit here, alive and breathing, I realize that death was only the beginning of something far greater, a journey that shattered my understanding of reality and revealed to me a hidden truth that had been buried for centuries. This is not just a story of survival. This is a story of awakening. A message that is not meant just for me, but for anyone who has ever felt that the world they live in is missing a deeper truth. Have you ever had that lingering feeling, deep in your soul, that something about history, about life, about who we truly are, has been intentionally hidden? That we have been led to believe a version of reality that is only a fraction of the full picture? That's exactly what I discovered when I crossed over to the other side. When I died, I expected darkness. Instead, I found a truth so powerful that it rewrote everything I had ever been taught. It was not just a personal revelation, it was a message for the world. A message about the true identity of Black people, their spiritual significance, and the centuries-old battle that has been waged in the unseen realms to keep them from knowing who they really are. I didn't ask for this vision. I didn't go looking for it. But the moment it was given to me, I knew I could never turn back. Because once you see the truth, there is no going back. This is the story of what happened to me, what I saw, and why I believe the world is on the brink of a great awakening. This is the truth they never wanted you to know. It started like any other day. A routine morning. A cup of coffee in my hands, the warmth spreading through my fingers as I stared out the window. The city was still waking up, the streets quiet except for the occasional hum of passing cars. I took a deep breath, inhaling the rich aroma of my coffee, unaware that this would be the last normal moment I would experience before everything changed. The sky outside was heavy, painted in dull shades of gray, the kind that warned of an incoming storm, though the weather forecast had said nothing about rain. The air felt thick, pressing down on me with an unseen weight. It was as if the world itself was trying to tell me something, a whisper in the wind, a message hidden in the stillness. But I was too caught up in my thoughts to notice. Bills. Deadlines. Responsibilities. I had been drowning in the endless worries of life, trapped in the same cycle of stress that consumed so many others. I barely paid attention as I grabbed my keys, locked the door behind me, and stepped outside. The crisp air nipped at my skin, but I brushed it off and got into my car, ready to take on another ordinary day. I never made it to work. The moment everything changed happened in the blink of an eye. One moment, I was driving, watching the traffic lights flicker between green and red, my mind lost in the usual distractions. The next, a sharp, searing pain shot through my chest. It wasn't just discomfort. It wasn't like a pulled muscle or a stomach cramp. It was an explosion of agony radiating from deep within, like a fist gripping my heart and squeezing with relentless force. I gasped, but no air came. My hands clenched the steering wheel as my vision blurred. The streetlights, the cars, the buildings, everything around me began to spin. My body was no longer responding. My limbs felt weightless, detached, as if I was sinking into some unseen abyss. And then, impact. A screech of tires. A deafening crash. A jolt so violent it felt like the entire world had been ripped apart. Then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my car anymore. I was above it. I hovered in the air, watching the scene unfold beneath me as if I were a spectator in someone else's tragedy. My crumpled car lay on the pavement, smoke curling from the hood. Glass shards glistened on the asphalt like scattered diamonds. A small crowd had begun to gather, their faces painted with shock and horror. And then I saw my own body. It lay motionless on the ground, surrounded by paramedics frantically working to revive me. A woman was crying nearby, her hands pressed to her mouth, whispering a prayer. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as emergency vehicles rushed to the scene. But I felt nothing. No pain. No fear. No panic. Only peace. A deep, overwhelming peace, unlike anything I had ever known. The kind that stripped away every earthly worry, every lingering doubt. It wrapped around me like a warm embrace, telling me that everything was exactly as it was meant to be. And then, I saw the light. It wasn't just light, it was alive. It pulsed, radiating warmth and love, drawing me in. It wasn't like any earthly light, not like the harsh glare of the sun or the flickering of a candle. This light felt pure, eternal, inviting. And something within me knew. This was the beginning of something greater. The light was not just light, it was alive. It wrapped around me like a warm embrace, pulling me in, whispering silent truths that I had long forgotten. It wasn't harsh, nor was it blinding, it was gentle, consuming, absolute. As I moved toward it, the world I had known began to dissolve behind me. Gone were my worries. Gone was the pain that had clung to me for years. Gone was the weight of regret, fear, and uncertainty. I was free. For the first time in my existence, I felt truly whole, as if I had returned to a place I had once belonged but had long forgotten. It wasn't just peace, it was home. Every part of me resonated with the warmth of this presence, as though I had been missing a part of myself all along and had now finally found it. Then, in the midst of that radiance, I heard it, a voice. Not loud, but powerful. Not spoken, but felt. It's not your time yet. I stopped. The light no longer pulled me forward. A presence formed before me, greater, stronger than anything I had ever known. And then, I saw him. Jesus. I had heard of him my entire life. I had seen paintings, read scriptures, listened to sermons. But none of them could have prepared me for this. Jesus was not just a figure standing before me, he was light itself. It did not shine on him, it came from him, as though every part of him radiated something far beyond human comprehension. It was not just a glow, it was a force, an energy, a presence that filled every corner of existence. The moment our eyes met, I felt everything within me tremble, not from fear, but from something deeper. I saw my entire life flash before me, every joy, every sorrow, every decision, every failure. It was as if my soul had been stripped bare before him, every secret laid open, every moment replayed in an instant. But what I saw in his eyes was not judgment. It was understanding. A love so profound it could break a person apart, only to rebuild them stronger. A love that did not erase the mistakes, but saw through them, past them, to something deeper, something more. I wanted to speak. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. But before I could, Jesus raised his hand. You need to see something, he said. And in that instant, everything changed. The light around us shifted, the warmth of the radiant glow gave way to something new, a different kind of presence, neither earth nor heaven. It was as if we had stepped into a space between worlds. I felt the fabric of time unraveling around me, as though we were no longer bound by its constraints. I could sense realities overlapping, layers of history, past and future, merging into a single moment. Then, visions began to form before me, moving images, like paintings come to life. And what I saw shook me to my core. I gasped, staring at the unfolding truth. Jesus turned to me, his expression solemn. The world has lied to them. My heart pounded as I realized exactly what he was about to show me. And why I had been chosen to see it. Jesus took me to a place unlike anything I had ever seen. It wasn't earth, but it wasn't fully heaven either. It was a space of revelation, a realm where truth had no shadows, where deception could not exist. Everything around us shimmered, shifting between dimensions. I could feel the weight of history pressing in, stories untold, voices long silenced, now whispering in the wind. Before me, visions began to appear, not as distant memories, but as living, breathing realities, paintings made of light and motion. Each one told a story. I saw ancient Africa, golden and majestic, filled with cities that rivaled any empire history had ever recorded. Towering structures, intricate palaces, libraries overflowing with knowledge, civilizations of wisdom, strength, and divine connection. Men and women walked through bustling marketplaces, adorned in fine garments, their skin glowing in the sunlight. They were scholars, builders, healers, visionaries, people of great purpose. They understood the stars, the rhythms of the earth, the language of the Spirit. They did not just worship God, they walked with Him, spoke with Him, heard His voice clearly. I saw prophets standing on mountain peaks, their hands lifted toward the heavens, their voices thundering with divine revelation. They did not need intermediaries, they had direct access to the Most High. I saw warriors, their armor gleaming, their spirits unbreakable. They fought not just for land or power, but for truth, justice, and divine order. Their presence commanded respect. Their eyes burned with wisdom. Their souls carried an inheritance the world could not comprehend. But then, the vision changed. The golden cities began to darken. I saw chains. I saw ships, massive, looming structures, carrying their precious cargo across violent seas. The people who had once ruled with wisdom and grace were now bound, shackled, stripped of their garments, their dignity, their very names. Their cries echoed through time, yet the world had turned deaf ears to their suffering. I saw whips lashing against their backs. I saw families torn apart. I saw centuries of deception unfolding like a malignant force, swallowing the truth and replacing it with a lie. But worst of all, I saw what was happening beyond the physical realm, something no history book had ever recorded. Behind the slave ships, behind the oppressors, behind the cruelty and the suffering, I saw the greatest deception of all. I saw shadowy figures, their faces obscured, their forms shifting like smoke. They were not human. They were the architects of the lie. They whispered into the ears of kings, planting the seeds of greed and conquest. They twisted scripture, distorting God's word to justify brutality. They forged a great lie, one that would be passed down through generations, one that would strip a people of their identity and blind them to their own divine purpose. I saw the rewriting of history, the erasure of truth. I saw paintings, once vibrant with dark-skinned saints and prophets, now faded into pale imitations. I saw books burned, artifacts stolen, knowledge buried beneath layers of misinformation. I saw how the world had been carefully, strategically, methodically deceived. And then, I saw Jesus. He stood beside me, his face filled with sorrow. The world has lied to them, he said, his voice heavy with grief. If they knew who they truly were, the world would change. His words hit me like a tidal wave. This was not just oppression. This was spiritual warfare. For centuries, black people had been told they were less than, that they were powerless, that they were slaves before they were kings. But it was not just a rewriting of history, it was a deliberate attack on their very souls. Because if they ever woke up, if they ever remembered who they were, they would shake the very foundations of the world. I felt my knees grow weak. My heart pounded as I realized the depth of what I was seeing. The war had never been about race. It had never been about slavery. It had always been about power, about keeping God's chosen warriors from realizing their true strength. Jesus turned to me, his eyes blazing with both sorrow and hope. The time of revelation has begun, he said. They will rise again. And in that moment, I knew, the awakening had already begun. As I stood beside Jesus, the visions before me shifted, the past fading, the present unraveling before my eyes. And then, I saw them. Dark entities. They lurked in the shadows of history, their forms shifting like smoke, their eyes filled with something ancient and calculating. They were not human. They had been there from the beginning, watching, manipulating, distorting. Their very presence sent a shiver through my soul, not because of fear, but because I finally understood what they had done. These beings were the unseen architects of deception, whispering into the ears of kings, influencing rulers, planting lies that would spread like wildfire through generations. They didn't just enslave bodies, they enslaved minds. They didn't just rewrite history, they rewrote identity. I saw them standing behind those who profited from oppression, guiding the hands that forged chains, orchestrating wars, orchestrating divisions. They worked in secret, hiding behind institutions, behind thrones, behind pulpits. They feared something. They feared what would happen if black people awakened. Because if they ever did, if they remembered who they were, they would be unstoppable. But the vision wasn't over. The past dissolved, and suddenly, I saw modern times. I saw a world filled with technology, screens glowing in dark rooms, people scrolling, searching, questioning. The internet, books, movements, shaking off centuries of deception. A generation no longer accepting the stories they had been told. I saw people waking up. I saw individuals who had always felt something was missing, suddenly realizing they had been lied to. I saw young men and women researching their ancestry, tracing their lineage, discovering their true history, their true power. I saw black people across the world breaking free from the psychological chains that had bound them for so long. But I also saw resistance. I saw governments moving swiftly to discredit these revelations. I saw media outlets pushing counter-narratives, labeling those who spoke the truth as radicals, conspiracy theorists, or worse. I saw leaders, even in religious institutions, urging people to remain silent, passive, asleep. This battle wasn't just physical. It wasn't just about oppression, or systemic injustice, or history being erased. It was spiritual. I saw demons standing behind world leaders, whispering into their ears. I saw principalities and powers pulling the strings of global institutions, feeding division, orchestrating conflict, ensuring that the truth remained buried. The world was being played like a grand chessboard, but the players weren't the ones we saw on the news or in politics. The real battle was unseen. And then, I turned to Jesus. His face was solemn, but his eyes burned with a fire that could not be extinguished. He looked at me, not just as an observer, but as someone who had a role to play in this war. The time of revelation has begun, he said. They will rise again. His words were not just a statement, they were a prophecy. I felt tears streaming down my face. This was bigger than I had ever imagined. This wasn't just about race. It wasn't just about history. This was about identity. About purpose. About destiny. The forces of darkness had spent centuries trying to erase, distort, and suppress this truth. But they had failed to understand one thing. Truth cannot stay buried forever. And now, the awakening had begun. Then, everything began to fade. The light that had once embraced me with warmth grew distant, the celestial realm that had felt more like home than anything I had ever known began to dissolve. The voices of the souls I had seen, the truths I had been shown, the presence of Jesus himself, all of it started slipping away. I felt an invisible force pulling me back, drawing me away from the place where time had no hold, where love was a living presence, where I had glimpsed the hidden battle of light and darkness. I panicked. No, I whispered, reaching out, my hands grasping at the fading light. I don't want to go back. I didn't want to return to the world of suffering, of confusion, of blindness. I didn't want to wake up in a reality where people were still enslaved by lies, where history had been twisted, where those in power were still playing their games of deception. I wanted to stay in the truth, to remain where everything made sense. But then, Jesus smiled. Not a smile of dismissal, nor one of pity. It was a smile of understanding, of purpose, of quiet but unshakable strength. You must, he said gently. The world needs you to speak. His voice was firm, but filled with love. It wasn't a request. It was a calling. I wanted to protest, to tell him I wasn't ready. But before I could, before another word could leave my lips, I felt something shift, a force greater than anything I had ever known pulling me downward, faster and faster, back toward my earthly body. Then, suddenly, pain. A gasp. A sharp inhale, like breaking through the surface of the ocean after nearly drowning. My eyes flew open. I was back. The first thing I heard was the frantic beeping of hospital machines. A relentless, rhythmic sound that rang in my ears. My body felt heavy, weighted down by something I couldn't explain. My chest ached, my limbs were weak, and my lungs burned as if they had been starved of air for too long. Then, voices. Crying. Soft hands gripping mine. Warm tears falling onto my skin. I turned my head slightly and saw them, my family. Their faces were streaked with relief and exhaustion, their eyes red from hours of weeping. My mother clutched my hand tightly, whispering prayers of gratitude. My father, a man who rarely showed his emotions, was wiping tears from his face. The doctors stood nearby, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. They had called it a miracle. A miracle. That's what they thought it was. But I knew better. It wasn't just a miracle. It was a mission. I had not simply been given another chance at life. I had been sent back, sent with a message, a truth that could no longer be silenced. I was no longer just Jessica. No longer just a woman who had survived a near-death experience. I was now a witness. A messenger. A warrior in the battle between truth and deception. And nothing in my life would ever be the same again. At first, I thought it would be simple. I thought people would listen. I thought they would see what I had seen, feel what I had felt, understand the magnitude of the truth I had been given. I believed that once they heard my testimony, once they knew the revelation Jesus had shown me, they would wake up. But I was wrong. Horribly wrong. When I told my family, they exchanged uneasy glances, my mother's eyes filled with concern, my father cleared his throat and gave me a soft, forced smile. "Jessica, you've been through a lot," my sister said gently, her hand on my shoulder. "Maybe this is just your mind trying to make sense of what happened. Trauma. That's what they called it. A hallucination. A dream. My brain's way of coping with the accident." But I knew better. When I told my church, I expected them to embrace the truth, to recognize the battle that had been waged against God's people for centuries. But instead, their faces grew tense. The pastor shifted uncomfortably. Some members avoided my eyes altogether. "We need to be careful with these kinds of claims," one elder said. "Not everything is meant to be spoken out loud. Keep quiet." That's what they wanted. A truth so powerful, so life-changing, yet they wanted me to bury it. To pretend I had never seen what Jesus had shown me. To push it aside like it was nothing more than a fleeting dream. I refused. So, I turned to the world. I began sharing my testimony online, through posts, videos, messages, anywhere I could. I thought, surely, if my voice was being silenced in person, maybe the internet would be my pulpit. But then, things started happening. At first, it was subtle. My posts vanished. Not flagged. Not reported. Just, gone. Videos I had uploaded, detailed accounts of my near-death experience, my conversation with Jesus, the hidden truth about black people, mysteriously disappeared. Then, the phone calls began. At odd hours. Always from unknown numbers. When I picked up, there was nothing but silence. No words. No voices. Just breathing, slow, heavy breathing. It sent chills through my spine. Then came the emails. Messages I had written would suddenly delete themselves. Passwords I had never changed were no longer working. Accounts I had never signed up for appeared in my name. It was as if someone, or something, was trying to erase me. And then, the shadows appeared. One night, after another long, exhausting day of trying to spread the message, I collapsed into bed, drained but resolute. The room was dark except for the faint glow of my phone charging on the nightstand. The city outside hummed with distant traffic, a familiar background noise. I had just begun drifting off when I felt it. A presence. Thick. Heavy. Unseen, but undeniable. The air in my room changed, colder, heavier, suffocating. My skin prickled, the hairs on my arms standing on end. I opened my eyes. And then, I saw it. A figure stood at the foot of my bed. Tall. Shadowy. Wrong. It had no distinct features, but I could feel its gaze piercing through me. Its presence was not human. It radiated something dark, something unnatural, something that did not belong. I couldn't move. I tried to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. My body felt like it was being pressed down, as if unseen hands were gripping me, keeping me paralyzed. And then, I felt its intention. It wanted me to stop speaking. It wanted me to be silent. I had never felt such an overwhelming, suffocating force of evil before. But deep inside me, a fire still burned. A fire that had been ignited by Jesus himself. So I did the only thing I could. I forced my lips to move. And I whispered, "In the name of Jesus, leave." The moment his name left my mouth, the shadow recoiled. A sound, not a scream, not a growl, but something inhuman, filled the room. And then, it vanished. The weight lifted. The air cleared. I gasped, sucking in breath after breath, my heart pounding in my chest. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just a struggle for truth. This wasn't just about history, identity, or revelation. This was war. A war between light and darkness. Between truth and deception. Between those who wanted the world to wake up, and those who wanted to keep it in chains. And I was on the front lines. There was no turning back now. Jesus turned to me, his expression both solemn and filled with an unshakable certainty. The air around us shifted, as if the very fabric of reality was bending to reveal something greater. "Look," he said. And then, I saw it, the future. At first, it was beautiful. I saw a great awakening, waves of people breaking free from the chains that had bound them for centuries. Their eyes, once clouded with confusion and deception, began to clear. I saw men and women, young and old, lifting their heads as if remembering something long forgotten. They reclaimed their divine identity, not as victims, not as forgotten people, but as a chosen generation, as warriors of light, bearers of a power that had been buried beneath layers of lies. The world began to shift. I saw black men and women rising to positions of influence, not through force, but through divine wisdom, undeniable presence, and unshakable faith. I saw leaders stepping forward, speaking truths that could no longer be silenced. I saw communities, once divided, coming together, the echoes of oppression being drowned out by a new song of restoration, strength, and divine purpose. But then, the vision changed. Darkness crept in, slithering through the cracks of society, desperate to reclaim what it had lost. I saw a great war. Not a war fought with weapons or armies, but a war of truth versus deception. I saw media corporations spinning lies, trying to reframe the awakening as rebellion. I saw governments scrambling, enacting new laws, desperate to maintain control. I saw even some religious leaders standing on the wrong side of history, preaching messages of complacency, urging their followers to remain asleep. And behind them, in the shadows, I saw them. The same dark entities that had whispered to kings and enslavers, the same spirits that had distorted history, that had silenced prophets, that had worked tirelessly to bury the truth. They were furious. Their hold on the world was slipping, the awakening had begun. And so, they retaliated. I saw persecution unlike anything before, people who spoke the truth being silenced, discredited, attacked. I saw those who stood in faith becoming targets, their reputations destroyed, their platforms stripped away, their voices drowned in waves of opposition. I saw riots, I saw division, I saw deception taking on new forms, evolving, becoming more sophisticated, more manipulative than ever before. The battle was no longer just about race, it was no longer just about history. It was about the very soul of humanity. And then, in the midst of the chaos, I saw the warriors. They were few at first, but they stood firm, unshaken, unafraid, unstoppable. They weren't fighting with fists or violence, but with truth, with knowledge, with faith. They were people who refused to bow to fear, refused to stay silent. They were teachers, leaders, artists, visionaries, speakers, healers, ordinary people with extraordinary purpose. They stood against the wave of deception, refusing to be moved. And as they stood, others followed. I saw a movement rise, not built on hatred or revenge, but on truth, unity, and divine restoration. And as this movement grew, as more people began to wake up, the darkness began to crack, to weaken, to fall apart. The world was being shaken, but it was being restored. Jesus turned to me, his gaze steady, his voice filled with both power and love. "The battle has begun," he said. "But victory belongs to those who walk in truth." And in that moment, I understood. This war was inevitable. The forces of deception had ruled for too long, and they would not give up without a fight. But the truth was rising. And no matter how hard darkness tried, it could never overcome the light. If you are reading this, it is not by accident. You did not stumble upon these words by mere coincidence, you were meant to see this. Something within you has always known that there was more to history, more to faith, more to the world than what we've been told. This is your moment. This is your awakening. You have a choice. You can turn away, you can tell yourself this is just another story, another idea, something to push aside and forget. You can convince yourself that everything is as it seems, that history has been told honestly, that power is in the right hands, that the world is exactly as it should be. But deep down, you already know that isn't true. Deep down, you have always felt it, that nagging sense that something about this world has been twisted, manipulated, and controlled. That you have been conditioned to accept a version of reality that is not the full truth. Now, you have seen the cracks in the illusion. Now, you know that there is more. So, what will you do? The time of revelation has begun. The truth is rising, the veil is lifting. People are waking up. The battle between light and darkness, between truth and deception, is unfolding before our very eyes. And you must choose a side. Will you stand in truth, no matter the cost? Will you seek, question, and uncover the knowledge that has been hidden? Will you refuse to be silent, to be controlled, to be a pawn in the game of deception? Or will you turn away, pretend you never saw this, return to the comfort of what is familiar, even if it is a lie? This is not just about knowledge. This is about destiny. This is about your role in what is coming. Because once you see, there is no going back. Once you wake up, you can never be put back to sleep. The time is now. The battle is here. The choice is yours. Choose wisely.